Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lizelle May Foss from the HEAL Data Stewardship Group, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our Fresh Fair session, CDEs Demystified, Tools, Updates, and Best Practices for Fair Data. Before we dive in, I want to acknowledge the challenges we've faced since the start of the year, when several NIH colleagues who championed data stewardship and open science were affected by a reduction in force. As a result, NIH presence at our Fresh Fair webinars has been minimal. And today, in the spirit of transparency, I'm excited to introduce Carolina Mendoza Puccini, Program Director at the NINDS Division of Clinical Research. Before Carolina goes on, I just want to introduce her for a bit. Carolina is a physician by training with 20 years of experience in clinical research. Before joining NINDS, she was a research fellow at the University of Miami, focusing on cognitive disorders within South Florida's richly diverse population. And so now I'll hand the presentation over to Carolina to finish the rest of our introduction.
Thanks, Lizelle. Hi, I'm Carolina Mendoza Puccini. As Lizelle mentioned, I worked at NINDS, and I'm a program official with the HEAL initiative. I'm involved mostly in the HEAL CDEs. So today's topic is right in my wheelhouse. I love to talk about CDEs and data standards. I lead the NINDS Common Data Elements project. I also serve on several trans-NIH data harmonization working groups and co-chair both the NIH CDE Governance Committee and the NIH CDE Development and Implementation Committee. Next slide, please. In today's webinar, we'll begin with a refresher on the CDE fundamentals and learn about recent advancements to the HEAL CDEs that help study teams meet NIH data submission requirements. You will receive an overview of the FAIR data principles, and our next speaker will talk about that. We'll highlight how the VLMD ensures data discoverability and integration across the HEAL ecosystem. We will then examine how the CDEs and the VLMD serve as building blocks for data consistency, reduction of variability, and improve the cross-study analysis to support the NIH mission for interoperable and reusable data. The HEAL platform team will introduce the CDE Picker, a user-friendly tool that streamlines the selection and application of the CDEs for metadata tagging. The session will conclude with a live Q&A featuring our guest speakers. Next, please. So these are today's presenters. Our first speaker is Kathy Sward. She's a PhD RN. Kathy is a professor in the University of Utah College of Nursing with a joint appointment in the Department of Biomedical Informatics. Sward earned a PhD in nursing informatics from the University of Utah. With research focus in clinical research informatics and informatics to support exposure science, her experience includes data management and harmonization, integration of data from non-traditional sources, and the design, development, and implementation of decision support systems and databases. She's an MPI for the HEAL Earned Data Coordinating Resource Center and the HEAL Kids Resource Data Center. Sward leads the team providing support to the HEAL CDE program as part of the HEAL data ecosystem. Our next speaker is Gaurav Vaidya, PhD. He's a semantic web technologist at RENC and a scientific software developer for the HEAL Data Stewardship Group, where he's been working on incorporating HEAL CDEs into HEAL semantic search and on improving the named entity recognition we use to identify biomedical concepts in data dictionaries. And our last speaker is Phil Shum. He's a director of the Biostatistics and Statistical Computing in the Center for Translational Data Science at the University of Chicago. He has served as technical director for numerous data coordinating centers, including the NIDDK-funded Inflammatory Bowel Disease Genetics Consortium and the International IBD Genetics Consortium, for which he has led development of a data commons. He is a co-PI or co-investigator with Robert Grossman of the HEAL Data Platform and co-leads the Data and Analytics Support Core for the NIDA-funded Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network, JCOIN. Next. So now we'll turn the presentation over to Kathy Sward. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolina. You can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to provide a little bit of a refresher and update about the HEAL CDEs in this section. Next slide, please. A common data element, or CDE, is a standardized, precisely defined question that is paired with the allowable responses to that question. This might be specifying the data type of the response, like it's free text or it has to be a number between X and Y. Most often, though, it is actually a specified set of choices, such as a 0 to 10 Likert scale, where 0 is no pain and 10 is the worst pain imaginable. Common data elements are used systematically across studies to ensure consistent data collection, and then at the other end of the study, they support data sharing and reuse. Most often, multiple question-answer pairs, or CDEs, are bundled together into a form or a validated questionnaire or a modified questionnaire. For simplicity during this discussion, we might use the term CDE to actually mean the form or the questionnaire, the set of common data elements that bundle together. Next slide, please. So the HEAL Common Data Elements program emerged early on in HEAL. It was initially focused on pain studies that involved humans and particularly interaction with the participants. And the use of HEAL specified common data elements is required for many of the pain studies. Common data elements, whether they come from the HEAL library or another source, are strongly recommended for other types of studies, in particular if you are interacting with participants in any way. If you're not sure whether or not common data elements are required for your research project, this is generally specified in your notice of award. Next slide, please. So if we look at this initial common data elements, it's split into two parts. There's a core set of questionnaires and then a large variety of supplemental questionnaires. In developing the core, early on in HEAL, experts across many NIH institutes, as well as experts from the clinical community, came together and identified a core set of domains that are relevant to pain research and specified certain questionnaires or questionnaire subsets and the individual questions, the common data elements, that are common and should be collected for any pain-associated HEAL trial. So these include a central set of demographics and participant descriptors. There are several pain-related domains, including pain intensity, pain interference, physical functioning, and sleep, pain catastrophizing, some emotional things like depression and anxiety, and then quality of life, satisfaction with treatment, and substance use. Next slide, please. There's a huge number of supplemental questionnaires that have been added to the HEAL CDE library. These were submitted by studies for consideration to be added to the library. This includes validated questionnaires and PROs that just weren't specified in the core, but are still pretty well known. It includes official alternate versions of questionnaires. For example, we have the brief pain inventory. The core includes 2 of the subscales. The full BPI short form and the long form are in the library as supplemental or optional choices. There's a number of modified questionnaires. There are some study-developed forms that are potentially reusable across multiple studies. And then in addition to the participant-facing kind of questionnaires, which are the bulk of these, there are a few that are clinical observations or report forms, like a example adverse event form. There's forms for observations like sensory testing. There's an extended array of domain topics beyond the domains that are in the core. And some of those are fairly specific either to a certain kind of treatment, like there's questionnaires for use of VR headsets. Some are condition specific. There's a number of social determinants and stigma type questionnaires. So there's sort of a nice broad picture of what's being used in HEAL research in that library. Next slide, please. So what is the CDE requirement? For studies that are in the pain arm of HEAL and that involve interaction with humans, the CDE requirement is in place. They're required to use the core questionnaires. The specific requirements are subset by your study type. So there's slightly different requirements for adult acute pain, adult chronic pain, and pediatric studies. But in general, the demographic form should be collected once, typically at baseline. There is a question about satisfaction with treatment that is collected once after treatment. If you don't have an intervention, the alternate is the global impression of change. And then all the other core questionnaires are typically expected to be collected twice, once at baseline and one at a subsequent time that each study is allowed to define what the subsequent collection timeframe is. And then the supplemental items may or may not be required as applicable for your study and as specified in your notice of award. We do, however, recommend that any HEAL study that has participant-facing data collection at least consider using either the HEAL Common Data Element questionnaires or some other form of CDEs. The HEAL CDE program had their repository linked on a HEAL website, and I just want to make sure people are aware that this repository is going to be moving from the website to a box folder. And if you have any questions or you need help accessing the most recent instruments, we have an email that is healcde@hsc.utah.edu, and our program managers can help you navigate that system. Next slide, please. So what has changed in the HEAL core? Fairly early on, not initially, but pretty early on, the RUCA codes were added to the demographic form. This is a rural-urban indicator. Some of the really early HEAL studies may not contain this data because it wasn't required until partway through, I think, the second or third year. We also added an optional language indicator. Several of our studies are using multiple languages, and this is a place on a participant by participant basis, you can say for this participant, we asked questionnaires in Spanish, or we asked the questionnaires in Swedish, or whatever language was used. More recently, the demographics form was modified again to add a social determinants of health set of questions. There were also a number of SDOH items that were added to the supplemental instruments. And then this year, in response to some of the new requirements, the gender question was removed from a requirement from the core. It still remains in the supplemental items if you choose to look at that question. The other things that happened in the past year, HEAL initially sort of broadly said you need to collect information about opioids being taken. In the past year, a HEAL specified morphine milliequivalent calculator was released. The important part is not that you use the calculator so much as that you use the calculations from the calculator to do the conversions. This year, we added the HEAL Kids program. This resulted in a significant expansion of the pediatric core. For younger participants, the earlier studies had adolescents and teens, and the HEAL Kids added younger participants. So the pediatric core was expanded, and we've been doing a considerable amount of backside work to link the Common Data Elements repository and the HEAL platform. And you'll hear more about that in the subsequent talks. Next slide, please. So where are we at? The early HEAL pain studies are just at the point where they have pretty much finished collecting data or are close to finishing, and they're starting to actually submit data to the public repositories. So the common data elements, which were specified early on for data collection, are now helping to inform the variable level metadata that will help us identify in these public repositories where the same data are being collected across studies, which should allow data to be harmonized across those studies and across the repositories. Next slide, please. So for more information about that, I'm going to turn the talk over to Gaurav.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Hi, everybody. I'm Gaurav Vaidya with the HEAL Data Stewardship Group at RENCI. I'm here to talk about, next slide. I'm here to talk about variable level metadata, CDEs, and the HEAL semantic search. Next slide. So our goal, the goal of the HEAL Data Stewardship Group is to try and make sure that all the HEAL data that's being collected by all of these different funded studies is being made as fair as possible. And by fair, we mean we want it to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. A key part of making this data fair is documenting the variable level metadata or the data dictionaries in a standardized way. This is these are the documents that describe what data your study is collecting, down to each individual variable, how that variable is structured in your data sets, how whether each variable is a numerical value, if it's a date, if it's a scale, what each possible permissible value on that scale means. We've just did a webinar last month that went into the process of creating and submitting your variable level metadata in detail. And Chelsea has just put a link into that video on in the chat if you'd like to have a look at that. While variable level metadata will make your data findable and accessible and interoperable up to a point, because somebody looking to reuse your data in the future will be able to transform it into the format that makes sense for them. HEAL CDEs take that a step further, because the HEAL CDE specifies how that data should be collected and how that data should be structured in your data set, which means, next slide, that if you have HEAL, if you have if you've standardized the variable descriptions and the variable codings, that means that data sets from different studies speak the same language. This consistency reduces variability, accelerates data integration, and improves the reliability of cross-study analyses. For example, when every team uses the same CDE for pain intensity or for collecting age at enrollment or any of the many other variables that you could collect, the data can be combined and compared without extra cleanup, without having to transform the data, without having to really dig into what that first study was trying to collect with its data. If the exact same instruments were used, then we know that the data was collected in exactly the same way. Submitting your data dictionary powers concept mapping and data set discovery in HEAL Semantic Search, which we're very grateful to the many studies who've submitted their data dictionary. And if you haven't already, please get in touch with the HEAL stewards in order to for us to help you get that data into our system. And CDEs are alongside that information, we are now also collecting information on which CDEs your study is using. And Phil will talk about that in just a bit. Next slide. So what happens to your data dictionaries and your CDEs when they come into the HEAL, when the HEAL data stewards ingest them? We ingest them into our search engine called HEAL Semantic Search. HEAL Semantic Search uses named entity recognition to look for biomedical concepts within your data dictionary. It then uses a knowledge graph called Robocop to expand the concepts associated with your, to connect from the concepts we find in your data dictionary to related concepts, to make it as easy as possible for other scientists looking to reuse your data to find the data that you've collected that will be most valuable for them. And to make this work quickly and give you the results as quickly as possible, we use Elasticsearch to store all of this cross-reference data and make it available to anyone who wishes to use it. Next slide. When you visit HEAL Semantic Search, you search for a biomedical concept like back pain. And because we've done this concept expansion, we can not only show you back pain itself as a concept, but also other concepts that are related to back pain, like lower back pain. We can show you diseases that have that can result in back pain, like fibromyalgia or neuralgia. And we can show you other types of pain that could be related to back pain, like chronic pain and arthralgia. For all of these concepts, we can show you studies that are collecting data relating to these concepts, and you can dig in further and look for the individual variables that they're collecting that are related to back pain. And for quite a while now, we've also given you the ability to search for CDEs relating to those concepts. So CDEs that include information to do with that allow you to collect information that to do with back pain or lower back pain or fibromyalgia and so on. Next slide. What we've been working on this year is to take that one step further and to establish connections between studies, variables, and CDEs. So we've been collecting information on which CDEs are being used by which studies, so that we can not only say here are the studies relating to chronic pain, but also here are the CDEs used by the studies relating to chronic pain. And we're currently working on going even further with that and connecting individual variables to individual CDEs within those instruments. So not just saying that a study uses the pain catastrophizing scale, for instance, but to say that variable 2 from study 1 is actually the same as the third question on the pain catastrophizing scale for a child. So by connecting all of these different pieces together, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to find the studies relating to concepts, the variables that are part of those studies, and the CDEs that are connected to those variables and to those studies. So they can find the data that would be most valuable for them to reuse in their own studies, and thus make the value of all this data we're collecting as great as possible in the future. Next slide. that was my very quick guide to why and how we're collecting variable level metadata, how CDEs have been and will continue to be a really important part of that, and why you giving us your data dictionaries is so important to make your data as fair as possible. I'll now hand it over to Phil Shum at the University of Chicago. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Gaurav. Next slide, please. So for those of you who may not be familiar yet with the HEAL Data Platform, the HEAL Data Platform offers 4 primary functions. The first is it gives users an opportunity to browse and search across all of the more than 1,000 now HEAL-funded studies. It gives users an opportunity to obtain detailed information, and here we mean by that we mean metadata at both the study and variable level, detailed information about each of those studies, allows users to access data that have been archived in HEAL compliant repositories, and then finally provides secure cloud-based workspaces to analyze the data for users who would like to do that. The HEAL Data Platform is open to all researchers and is approved to operate at the FedRAMP moderate level. Next slide, please. So we've been talking today about CDEs, and at the moment, these are the things that you can do with CDEs on the HEAL Data Platform. The first is that you can associate the CDEs that you have used in your study to collect data with your study. And the most important thing, if you are a HEAL-funded pain investigator who is required to use the HEAL pain CDEs and who has completed the REDCap form where you indicate which CDEs you're using, you do not need to do this step. That has already been done automatically. As Kathy mentioned at the beginning, we interoperate with their system and get that information automatically. Number 2, you can upload other variable level metadata, either other non-HEAL CDEs if you've used them, or measures that are specific to your study. We had held a webinar that showed you how to do that, and the link there is to the posting or recording of that if you want to look. You can download variable metadata associated with any of the studies. All of the metadata are open access. You can search for studies based on variable level metadata, including the CDEs. So this is a little bit different from the semantic search that Gaurav was describing earlier, but does allow you to do very simple things like ask the question, show me all the studies that use this particular CDE, for example. That will be available in our production instance in the next a couple of weeks. And finally, you can use tools in our workspaces to validate data against CDEs, to transform data collected with those CDEs to a specific data model, for example, a data model used by a repository, and then finally to harmonize data across different studies. And some of that has been demonstrated in a previous webinar, and the link appears there in the last item. I am going to show you the first 3 items on this list today. Next slide, please. So just to give you a visual overview, the HEAL Data Platform is depicted in the center of this figure. And all of the HEAL CDEs, both the core and the supplemental that Kathy described, that entire library has been ingested into the data platform and is represented there as a series of variable level metadata documents according to a formal schema and so forth. What investigators can do is they can then link those to their study to indicate that they collected data using a particular CDE or CDEs. Again, if you've completed the REDCap form indicating which CDEs you've used, you do not need to do that step. The second is if you've collected data using other measures, then you can submit information on those measures by uploading them. And then third, as I mentioned, users can come along and download that variable level metadata for your study or any other study for some of the purposes that I described on the previous slide. So I'll switch over to demonstrate this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you. Okay, and here's a web browser, and here's the HEAL Data platform. Those who are looking up in the URL here may notice I'm using a pre-production version of our platform just to support the demonstration today, but the healdata.org site is identical to this. And so I'm going to go to our discovery page by clicking on the discovery link here. And the first thing I just want to point out to you, you can see at the top by seeing my email address there that I have already authenticated to the platform. What I'm going to be showing you today requires that you authenticate to the platform. And I just wanted to save you the hassle of watching me go through the two-factor authentication. But anyone who has credentials in one of the identity providers that we support can come and authenticate. You do not have to create an account. So once I've done that, I have a list of studies here. You can see the whole list is more than 1,000 at this point. Studies that are registered, what we call registered, will have this green linked icon. And that's the first step. If you haven't registered your study, you need to do that first. Again, we provide a lot of information on this, and you can ask or reach out if you're having problems doing that. Once you've registered your study, if you go ahead and click on that study, you will see at the top of the study page a link that says request access to submit variable level metadata. If you haven't done that yet, you can go ahead and do that. And then once you've done that, you can go through the steps that I'm showing you here. And so I'm going to pull up a study for which I do have that access. And in fact, this is a study that represents the data platform itself. That's the project we use to develop the platform. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the study here. And you can see now at the top, that link has changed into a link that says submit variable level metadata. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on that. Now, I showed you 3 arrows before. The first arrow is to submit CDE or to link CDE data. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and click on that link here. And again, that link will be grayed out if you have completed that REDCap form. Once I click on that, then it lists the core CDEs that Kathy described, and then all of the supplemental ones down below. You can see I have already gone ahead and indicated that we have used a couple of these CDEs. And I've done so by clicking on some of the core and by adding some of the supplemental. Once you have done that, you can come back at any time and modify this list. So for example, we encourage you to do this as soon as as soon as you get your award, so that we have this information in the platform. It can be used for our search engines and so forth. But when you finally come around to, you may make changes to your instruments and so forth in the process of doing your study. You can come back then. And then finally, when you go to submit your data to a repository, you may realize that you left out 1 or 2 of these. You can come back and modify it then. The interface here is very easy. For the core CDEs, you just click them and they should be easy to find here. And then for the supplementals, there are hundreds of those. That's a big list. But what you see here is that we've got a type ahead interface. So for example, if I just start typing, it will pull up the ones that I'm interested in. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to make this as easy for folks to use as possible. Once you have completed that, you can then go back to your study and you will see 2 things. The first is you will see a bunch of tags down at the bottom that correspond to the CDEs that you have indicated that you've used. And one thing to note, that update does not happen in real time. That's on a bit of a delay, several hours for these tags to populate. But the second thing that you can do, this happens immediately. If I go and click on my study, and then I go up to the data tab, I will get a button called download variable level metadata. And so if I go ahead and download that, that will download a package of the variable level metadata for that particular study. It comes down as a zip file. And if I undo that, you can see at the moment, all I have done, the only variable level metadata I've provided here are for common data elements. And here they are. These are exactly the same that were checked and specified in the form I showed you before. And in fact, if I go ahead now and open these, you will see here are the metadata that correspond to that particular CDE. We don't have time today to talk about the format. This is JSON format. It's an open, easy to use format for a lot of purposes. And you know, you can reach out to us if you want more information on that. So that shows you the first and the third arrows. I'm going to come back here and come again over to the submit variable level metadata area. And instead of submitting CDE, I can also submit additional dictionaries. And as I pointed out in an earlier slide, we have a webinar that shows you how to construct the files to upload here. That's been recorded. And then once you construct those files, you can simply use this interface to upload those files. They will get validated and then stored. And just like the CDEs, you can come back here at any subsequent point and modify these while you're conducting your study, or when you finally get around to archiving the data once you've finished the study. So that's a quick demonstration of some of the things you can do with CDEs on the platform now. And I think I'll pass it back to Lizelle then.
Thank you, Phil. Let me share my screen again. Thank you to all of our presenters. To summarize the key points that were discussed during the presentation portion, we had a refresher on the FAIR principles and variable level metadata, the importance of variable level metadata and CDEs in the HEAL ecosystem, quick refresher on HEAL CDEs, and a demonstration of CDEs on the HEAL data platform. And so for this portion, I will invite our presenters to turn on their cameras so we can proceed with the Q&A. So we have Gaurav, Kathy, Phil, and Carolina. And I will stop sharing my screen and begin our discussion. The first question we have is, once clinical data elements were developed, CDEs, how did the program choose CDEs? Were they picked from an existing CDE repository, such as the NIH CDE repo, or were they created brand new? And I think, Kathy, I'll hand it off to you to kick us off, but for the rest of our panelists, feel free to chime in whenever.
So the common data element specifications were developed specifically for HEAL. They were informed by things like the NIH repository, and in many cases, crosswalked back to the repository. The HEAL CDE core has actually been submitted to the NIH CDE repository. The elements were either crosswalked where they matched or added if they were new, but predominantly this was new development that has then been cross-linked back.
Thanks, Kathy. Anyone else want to add something? If not, I can go ahead with the second question. HEAL offers a variety of powerful tools to promote fair data sharing. Could someone provide a real or hypothetical use case example showing how these tools might be used together in a workflow to identify and combine compatible data sets? I think all three could have some sort of input for this, because I definitely get that we have all these tools. So we want to explain to the audience how we can kind of, use these tools together to find potential compatible data sets.
So I can maybe start that off, but this work essentially is just beginning. I mean, it's within the last 6 months to 9 months that folks are completing their studies and beginning to submit their data to repositories. And so we're working right now on building out a few examples of exactly how you would use these. One way that you would use them now and with our, the search tools that you've seen, is if you're interested in a particular CDE, so studies that used that CDE, it is entirely straightforward now to identify all of the studies that collected data with that CDE. Depending on what it is that you're wanting to do at that point, you could immediately look to see which of those studies had already provided their data to a repository. You could drill in a bit more to see what auxiliary information those studies provided or what their designs were for combining them. One of the things that the CDEs work nicely because they pre-specify a format and so forth. It is more difficult for studies that did not collect data from those CDEs. And so one of the things we're beginning to explore is the possibility to use various tools, including AI models, to look at the variable level metadata that the HEAL platform has and to try and identify similar studies, either studies that have collected similar data or that were designed similarly, that might be candidates for, either a mega analysis or meta-analysis or a joint analysis of that type. The final thing I'll just say, and this we already have a couple examples of, and we'd be glad to point you to those. If you have done a study that either replicates another HEAL study in whole or in part, or is related, and you want to combine the data from your study with the data from that HEAL study, either to do a replication, to scale up in terms of the power, those kinds of things, you can go ahead and upload your data directly into the platform, access the HEAL data once you've been approved to access them if they're controlled access, and some of the tools we've referred to today, you could use to facilitate that harmonization. So I realize there's still a fair bit of hand waving. You asked, rightly so, for a very concrete sort of example or workflow, and those will be forthcoming.
Just to add on to that from the HEAL data stewards perspective and the HEAL semantic search perspective. First of all, I should say that the HEAL data platform has really good APIs that allow you to access all of this information that Phil has been talking about and has been showing us how they're collecting this information. And any information that goes into the HEAL data platform does come into HEAL semantic search as well. So we also have all of those study to CDE. We also have information on which CDEs are being used by which study, and we're working to incorporate that into HEAL semantic search. Our goal with HEAL semantic search is pretty precisely to make it as easy as possible to identify compatible data sets. So that's something we're currently doing from a concept-based perspective, but we do have a pretty big redesign of HEAL semantic search in the works, which is going to make it even easier to find CDEs and then to find the studies that use those CDEs, which I think is the clearest way to achieving the goal in this question. So once that's up and running, we will be back at this forum to demonstrate those features as well.
Thank you. If there's no additional insights regarding that question, I can move on. Next question we have, where do we find the REDCap form to associate CDEs used in our studies? Kathy?
So if you are a HEAL pain study, email the HEAL CDE team and they will send you a study-specific invitation to that form. If you are not in a HEAL pain study that is required to use the HEAL CDEs, then you can access that information through the platform.
Thanks, Kathy. Next question. I'm a little confused about the CDEs. One, do they apply even if our studies are not pain focused? Two, we are a DCC. Is there a way we can verify whether the data our partners are sharing with us meet the CDE standards or are collected in such a way that would be considered CDEs?
So
Well, that's just a couple of small questions. Go ahead, Phil.
no, Kathy, the more important question is whether they're appropriate. So I was going to let you start with that, and I'll come back and take the second one.
So there are a number of common data elements that might be appropriate even if you're not a pain-focused study. So one thing you can do, you can look not only through the HEAL CDE library and see if the instruments are appropriate, and they're certainly allowed to be used in non-pain studies. There are also a number of other toolboxes that have common data elements. So the FENIX toolkit, the NIH toolbox, the NIH Common Data Element Repository. If you're not required to use the HEAL CDEs, I would still encourage people to look at some of these other resources because having the data structured and pre-specified really supports data sharing.
And so I would just add briefly to that. First, if you're a DCC, feel free to contact the platform. I think, most of the HEAL DCCs we've worked with directly, just because we find out that there are things we have that can be helpful to you and things you have that can be helpful to us. So we found those to be pretty valuable collaborations. We do have tools that can validate data sets against the CDE and other variable level metadata schema. And so I think the first thing would be, based on your question, we can describe those to you, share those. That's all open and accessible and very easy to modify. And so we've had a fair bit of luck sharing those with folks and then having them modify them for their specific use case. And so I think the answer would be, short answer is yes, we probably have some things that may be of interest to you in validating data that's coming in and or transforming them as necessary. We'd be glad to do that at any time.
Thanks, Kathy and Phil. Next question. Will we be able to upload HEAL data to the HEAL platform at any point in the future? Phil, do you want to give an overview of kind of how the platform works?
Sure. So I actually answered that question too in the written answers. So, but just briefly, so the HEAL data platform doesn't store any data. All it provides is secure pass-through access to data on behalf of the user that are stored in more than 24 HEAL compliant repositories, and those include a lot of NIH repositories, but also non-NIH repositories. So if you're talking about submitting data, then those go to one of those repositories, and the HEAL data stewards can provide whatever guidance and help you need in identifying one or more appropriate repositories to submit your data. And I think it's safe to say, yes, you certainly can submit data at any point in the future to those repositories. And then for HEAL investigators, those can be linked in through the platform. If you were talking about metadata and submitting those to the platform, then yes, those can be submitted at any point in the future and or modified as necessary.
Thank you. Next question. Does HEAL have any sleep-related CDEs?
We sure do. So there are a couple in the core, and in the supplemental instruments, there are about 11 different questionnaires. We are happy if you contact our CDE team to show you the list of questionnaires or help you navigate searching through that library.
Fantastic.
And I would just add that if you, I don't know what study you're part of, but if you have actually collected either polysomnography, PSG data, and or accelerometry data, and are planning to submit those, we would love to hear from you because we do a fair bit of work with those. I think that would be the first study that has those data that then would be accessible through the data ecosystem. And so if you're interested at all in, a quick virtual coffee over those data, any of us would be glad to talk with you.
Next question. Can you explain again the process for making my study discoverable in HEAL Semantic Search? And what role does submitting a HEAL CDE aligned data dictionary play in that? Gaurav, this is for you.
Yes. So to begin with, we now have multiple ways in which you can make your study discoverable in HEAL Semantic Search. The next version of HEAL Semantic Search that we're working on is going to have all of the studies included in the search, so you can search for an individual study in there. Currently, HEAL Semantic Search is based on the data dictionaries that people submit to us. You can submit your data dictionary in the VLMD format that we've come up with through the HEAL data platform. And in just a minute or two, I will put a link in the chat to the documentation that explains how you can do that. If you are running into any problems in doing that, you can also contact the HEAL data stewards who can help make your data dictionary accessible to the platform, regardless of what format you have it in. The platform has also developed a VLMD tool that can convert many commonly used data formats such as REDCap or Stata or a whole bunch of others into the VLMD format without you having to do any extra work. So these are all the different ways in which you can get your data dictionaries into the HEAL data platform. In terms of getting HEAL CDE aligned data dictionaries, if your data dictionary has information in it that says, for instance, that one of the forms in your data dictionary is really the PHQ-2 questionnaire or is the GAD-7 questionnaire, for instance. We're working on LLM-based methods to try and identify those from your data dictionary automatically without you having to do any additional data annotation. But if you're in that category and you want to make sure that that CDE information makes it to us, I would ask you to please get in touch with the HEAL data stewards because we would love to see that data and to work with you on getting it into HEAL Semantic Search.
Thanks, Gaurav. Next question. What is the process for updating the CDE list if during our study life cycle, we initially selected a CDE, but later decided not to use it or remove the associated questionnaire from our question bank?
So the answer, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the answer to this depends on whether you completed the REDCap form that Kathy's team put together or not. Since I'm talking, if you did not, if you instead used the process to link those CDEs to your study that I illustrated in the demonstration a little bit before, you can return to that form at any time. And you can either check more boxes, uncheck a form that you had checked before or selected that you're no longer using. And those changes will then immediately be made. If you filled out the REDCap form, then Kathy will tell you what to do.
So if you are a pain study and required to fill out the REDCap form, which is the HEAL Common Data Elements platform for the pain studies, you will annually get a reminder to update that, but you can also just shoot an email to our project managers at that HEAL CDE email, and they'll update it for you.
And if I could just add, please do that. This is wonderful because having this CDE information, even before your data are ready, are providing all of these kinds of things like Gaurav described, the semantic search and other kinds of things. And obviously, the more accurate they are, the better all of that will work. And so if you just take a minute to update those, that's fantastic. Strongly encouraged and very much appreciated.
Perfect. And related to that question, what is the difference between the CDE REDCap intake form and the platform CDE picker tool?
So they capture exactly the same information. Once you complete the REDCap form, that information is incorporated, is ingested into the platform, and it does not happen in real time. So if you just completed that REDCap form, you won't see those immediately, but it happens, I think monthly or something like that. But if you have any questions, if you at any point feel that those two are inconsistent for your study, and if you filled that REDCap form out, several weeks in the past, feel free to contact us and we'll help you sort that out.
All right, our last question. Does HEAL currently have or plan to produce a report on the landscape of combinable datasets, such as a list of studies with details on population samples and datasets that could be used? And if such a report exists, could it be shared?
I can talk a bit about this. So we don't have a specific report on the landscape of combinable data sets. However, we do these data asset inventory reports that try and summarize the data that's being collected across the landscape. I think the last one we did was a few years ago, and these are publicly accessible, and they include information like what the research focus, activity codes, and award sizes are, what the data types and structures being generated are, and which HEAL compatible compliant repositories are being used, what their data sharing intentions are, and what metadata and standards they're using, including what CDEs they're using.
And I would just add to that, as I mentioned, it's just now that data are really beginning to move through the pipeline, that people are submitting their data. But I think where you were going with that question was, what can we do to facilitate secondary data users who want to sort of see and get a map into the studies that are there that can help them. And I mentioned we're also looking at using some AI tools to do this. What I can tell you for sure is that the intention is to make that accessible to the users. That's why we would do that. So I would say keep your sort of ear to the ground, because as soon as we have anything like that that we feel can be helpful to potential secondary data users, we will definitely make it available.
And just to answer the question that just came in, the DAI does not include all HEAL studies. For the second DAI, we sent out around 350 invitations and got about 125 responses. So it's based on a subset of HEAL studies that responded to our questionnaire.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our Q&A portion. And I would like to thank all of our presenters that were here today. The HEAL Stewards and HEAL Data Platform team have a variety of resources available, as well as the CDE team, as you saw during Kathy's presentation. So please connect with us at any time to ask further questions or set up a consultation. We will send a follow-up email with the slide deck, as well as a recording of this presentation, so you can always come back to it. And so thank you to the audience for your participation today in today's webinar. And we hope you will reach out to the HEAL Stewards team for questions or support. as you embark on your FAIR journey to maximize the value of HEAL data. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next month on Thursday, September 18 at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a focused session on data sharing. And in addition to our presenters and panelists, we'd like to acknowledge the behind the scenes team that were listed in the previous slides. And with that, thank you again and have a wonderful day.